I invited Eric Knight. I think everybody knows you, Eric,
I don't know about that, but thank you for having me.
with Orenda. It's like the third time I've interviewed you for something or another, and it's always a pleasure to have you. So I wanted to invite you in to be able to talk about the Orenda products and what you guys sell for Orenda products, specialty chemicals to supplement your pool chemistry.
Well, thank you for having me. You say spur of the moment. This was planned, but I guess calendar invitations, technology sort of gets in the way. I thought it was for a podcast. I didn't know, but
No,
always
this
happy to
is
talk. Although I will say this is really rare. Normally, when I'm broadcasting something, it's an educational thing, and I'm not talking about products. Really, by design, don't want to talk about products, but that's what you want to talk about. So go ahead and ask me
yes.
anything. I can share my screen. It's
Yes,
completely up
share
to
your
you.
screen, Eric, and let's talk about some of the specialty products that Orenda has to offer and what do they do and how will they help the pool technician?
Okay, sure. For those of you watching, thanks for being here. We don't make a lot of things at Orenda. We have a very small, focused line. Everything is designed to be biodegradable, natural, things like that. And we don't want to have 50 products. So we really only make three things. And those three things are a phosphate remover. Our main one is PR 10,000, a chelating agent, which is most known as a startup or a stain preventer or a scale inhibitor sort of thing, called SC1000. And then we make an enzyme called CV600. That same enzyme is expanded into two other products. CV700 is blended with the phosphate remover, and CV600 is also in our Clarifier, which is a chitosan natural clarifier that is cut in with enzymes. So I kind of jokingly say it's a clarifier on steroids because it helps get rid of the non-living organics and the oils as well. But that's our line pretty much. We do have some spa products, but I don't think we really need to talk about them right now.
I think it's great that you're focused. The company's focused on the things that you want to do. When companies start coming out with a lot of stuff, you get unfocused. So you're focused on the main products, the main goal, what you're trying to do in the pool. Mm-hmm. And if there's something that you can do to make those better, you can focus in on that. I think that's great.
Well, we've got a philosophy that we're never going to stray from at Orenda, and that is be proactive. So proactive pool care with no chemical conflicts, which is why our line is so, succinct. And yeah, let's see, proactive pool care, no chemical conflicts, and no long-term byproducts left behind. So we don't want to leave behind things like metals in your water over the long term or anything that's going to be harmful down the road. It may be effective today, but when it accumulates over time, it can be a detriment. None of the products that we sell are going to do that. So that's a big part of our entire mantra there. And the no chemical conflicts one is a big one because there are a lot of products that conflict with one another, even in the same line. If you look throughout the pool business, and I'm not going to name names, but if you are trying to do two things and you're selling two products that actually fight each other, that's not really fair to the pool owner. And it's certainly not fair to the service tech who is trying to make a living fixing that pool or keeping that pool clean, healthy, safe, et cetera. So we don't want to have any conflicts in our line.
Awesome. And since we've been seeing a lot in the industry recently about shortages, chlorine shortages, that kind of thing, and I'm just going to stick to that because we're talking about Orenda chemicals, the enzyme CV600 would be awesome because that's going to help with your chlorine, correct?
Right. So yes, what you're saying is absolutely true. There is a chlorine shortage going on, specifically with trichlor, but you'd be kidding yourself to think that with a massive trichlor shortage, which we are all facing, that other chlorines are going to be just as easy to find. Well, you could still get, liquid chlorine and cal hypo, but the demand is so high, it's just simple economics. The price is going to have to go up because the demand has gone up so much. And we look at that at Orenda as an opportunity to get off of the pill, to get off of the addiction to trichlor, because cyanuric acid overstabilization is such a huge problem that this is going to afford pools a nice opportunity to get off of that. Now you can still buy cyanuric acid, no problem getting that. It's hard to get it already stabilized in form of trichlor or dichlor. So
I'm so, after being a health inspector down here in Florida, where a lot of our brand new public pools come on a liquid chlorine now, it's unstabilized chlorine. So then they still, doesn't mean they don't want cyanuric acid in there. They just end up having to hand feed granular cyanuric acid in to help protect that chlorine. And it's always nice because as long as they don't have a leak or major loss somewhere of water where they get dilution, they have control over their CYA level.
Yeah, they do.
I love those liquid feeder systems. They're more expensive, but I mean, because our health department does not allow routine addition of chemicals by hand. That would be more your residential pools, but commercial public pools, they want feeders. They're doing small increments over the entire time period. So that's the idea. But the great thing is your products are also NSF approved. That nice little point to it right now on the bottle there for everybody to see.
The big NSF
NSF
mark
insignia is not on every pool chemical that you ever buy. So standard 50 is something that some of the health departments across the country may require it when you're using pool chemicals on a public swimming pool. So that's a biggie for me right there, being a past inspector regulatorily. That's a biggie there.
Certainly NSF 50 is something that we promote it heavily. Number one, we're very proud of it, but it's a very hard standard to meet. It is for recreational water. Now, there is another standard that the enzyme in particular used to meet. We just kind of let it lapse because we never changed our formula, so we know it could pass it. It was standard 60 certified as well, which was a drinking water standard for CV600. There wasn't really a practical need to hold on to that to that standard 60 certification, but it's the same exact product. But here you can just see all of our registrations. Everything is linked in the website, so it's public information. If you have that NSF mark, you can watch this video here that it explains the importance of that. And it's a safety standard and it's a purity standard that they can randomly come in and audit our packaging facilities. They can just pluck a bottle off a shelf at any store. And if it's not exactly what it's supposed to be in that bottle, we're in deep trouble. And they have to do an audit back on the batch label. And basically it tells you as a consumer, number one, we're not going to change our product without you knowing. That includes just diluting it. We're not going to cut it with more water because that's going to affect our NSF label. So we're not going to do that. So you're guaranteed that what you're buying is what you bought last time. And that's something that we're very adamant about to make sure that, number one, this product is safe. It is third-party validated. It meets a very high purity standard, and there's no artificial fillers inside these bottles. That's a big one that I hear a lot of complaints about from customers that, this product used to work a lot better 5 years ago. Well, I can't speak to what it was 5 years ago because I've only been in the industry 4. But that being said, if you could change your product with no punishment whatsoever or no accountability, who knows what's in that bottle? Well, you actually know exactly what's in our bottle, that it was what it was supposed to be. And that's what the NSF mark means. So it's a very important thing to us.
The other great thing I see on your website, readily available right there, is the SDS sheet for the chemical, because OSHA requires that you have SDS sheets for all chemicals in case there's some type of accident, or the pool truck was hit and there was a car accident, or if it's the chemical room and there was a fire or something, you had a big spill, the EMS, when they show up, know what they're dealing with. So that's great that information's right there, easy to get. They can download it, print it out, put it in their binder, or even save it electronically.
Well, even better than that, they don't even need to, because it's in the Orenda app. So if you have the Orenda app, in fact, I can plug my phone in here and share my screen. I'll show you where it is. In the products pages, all of the SDS sheets are uploaded in there. So if you are in a pinch and you need that SDS sheet for chemicals in your truck, and hopefully you don't find yourself in that situation, but let's say you do. Let's see. Go to the app. Let's see if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to go to Orenda Products here. And let's say we want the SC1000. Oh, there's the SDS sheet right there.
That's easy.
Yep, it's all in there. And if you want to share that, you can just tap this share button right there, and you can send it to whoever needs to see it or whatever else. And then if you want to get back to the website, just tap learn more, and it's going to take you to the same page that we're on now, right on the website.
Nice.
Yeah, we try to keep it simple, shareable. But again, we don't have a lot of products. So if you want, I can explain what these products do.
Yes.
A lot of people watching probably already know, but
we might have some beginners that might be interested. So let's do that.
So in terms of the chlorine shortage, what we have to think about is, what is chlorine getting used up in the first place? What is actually consuming chlorine? When we think of chlorine demand, it's actually a very, very small amount of germs, thankfully. You don't want it to be a lot of germs in your pool. You actually want no germs, ideally. But you have to have a residual free chlorine in there. And I know some pools use bromine, but some sort of halogen disinfection that is a residual, meaning it is circulating throughout the entire body of water. There are some great secondary sanitizers that will disinfect very effectively, but they're in the pump room, they're in the equipment set, and they're at the mercy of the circulation rate. And it's not like water waits its turn to be circulated. It's a constant dilution and cycling process. Chlorine is everywhere throughout the system, and you don't need a lot of it. So hypochlorous acid, the strong killing form of chlorine, hands down is the best sanitizer, primary sanitizer, and algicide that you can have in your pool. There's no comparison. And the key is, you have to make sure that that is in enough of a reserve that it can kill germs as they're introduced. It's very, very easy for chlorine to kill a germ. It's very easy for it to kill a virus like COVID. It is not as easy to kill a parasite like a recreational water illness, Giardia, or especially crypto, which is why you need to make sure you have a lot of it, and that there are procedures. You know this from teaching CPO, Lauren. You have to shut your pool down for an extended period of time. You may have to drain some water to make sure that you effectively kill that parasite. But we at Orenda, we don't make anything that kills anything. That's not our job. We want to assist chlorine. We want to supplement it in the background. And so the vast majority of the demands on chlorine are actually non-living things. Mm-hmm. This is called the oxidant demand. These are things that have to be oxidized, not sanitized, not killed, oxidized. So the first category of oxidant is metals. Usually you don't have a lot of metals, but if you're in the Great Lakes area, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, they have a lot of iron in their water. You get to the Pacific Northwest, they have a lot of manganese in their water. Mm-hmm. Okay. Depending on where you are, you can have copper in your tap water. You could have it in the groundwater, whatever. Natural percolation of water will, it's the universal solvent. So you're going to have some metals, especially if you're on a well. But typically the amount of metals, even if you have them, pretty small, very small percentage of your oxidant demand. Now, it's very easy for chlorine to oxidize something like iron. So it's going to oxidize a lot faster than, say, something like sunscreen, but it's not a huge percentage of your chlorine demand, usually. Then you have nitrogen compounds. And in a backyard pool, nitrogen compounds like urea and ammonia, typically not a big deal. And what I say not a big deal, almost negligible, because you just don't have the bather load that leads to this. Totally different story in commercial, especially with competitive swimmers and aqua aerobics and kids, swim schools, things like that, because urea and ammonia come from our bodies when we pee in the pool and we sweat in the pool. Well, it's very complex. A nitrogen compound like ammonia, NH3, it takes a lot of chlorine to get that out. And this is where you get the term combined chlorine. Now, you're familiar with this by teaching CPO, but how does chlorine actually oxidize ammonia? It combines with it. And so that actually has a little bit of disinfection power. So you'll convert by throwing an HOCl, hypochlorous acid. It oxidizes NH3 and it replaces one of those hydrogens with a chloride. And now you get something called monochloramine. In fact, I have a graphic here that will explain this a little bit better.
Yes, go ahead and share.
Let me pull it up. Let's see here. I think this is it. Yes. Sharing my screen now. I didn't think we were going to go down this path, but I'm glad we do. Okay, so here's how chloramines are formed. So you have this NH3 ammonia, and then you throw enough chlorine at it, and you get this new thing, monochloramine. See, all it did was replace a hydrogen with a chloride. Okay, 5-to-1 weight ratio. Okay, so then you throw more chlorine at it, and then you lose another hydrogen. It becomes dichloramine, and then it becomes trichloramine, also known as nitrogen trichloride. This is what off gases in the air. And this is the primary component of the pool smell. This is the stuff that got me sick when I trained indoors as a competitive swimmer. This is why I'm in the industry. This is just one of hundreds of variations of byproducts when chlorine has to combine with nitrogen compounds. And it's more than just that. I mean, we've heard of the breakpoint chlorination curve. This is the process of chlorine combining with nitrogen compounds, then destroying those nitrogen compounds, hitting the breakpoint, and building a free chlorine residual. We have a whole article on that. I don't need to get into all of it, but essentially that's still a small percentage of your oxidant demand, usually. Okay. It matters a lot in commercial pools because that's where the noxious byproducts come from. That's where a lot of the health issues, bather irritation, it all happens in that category. But in terms of total chlorine demand, it's still a relatively small percentage. The Mac Daddy, the behemoth of the oxidant demand is non-living organics. When we say organics, we're talking carbon chain organics. These are things like bather waste. There are the natural bather wastes, the sweat minus the ammonia, dead skin cells, body oils, the oils in your hair, mucus, all the nasties. But then you got the bather products. And Lauren, this is where these are man-made products that are far more complex than natural body oils. These are tanning oils, lotions, deodorants, cosmetics are huge. And of course, sunscreen. Well, it takes a lot of chlorine to get rid of those things. And I mean a lot of chlorine compared to what it would take to kill a germ. You can't even really compare. So the vast majority of your chlorine is getting used up on things that it wasn't made to get rid of. It's comparatively weak as an oxidizer anyway. Chlorine is an outstanding sanitizer. It's not that great of an oxidizer. I mean, it'll do it, but it wasn't made to do it. I mean, you compare chlorine's strength as an oxidizer compared to something like ozone or AOP, there is no comparison to be had. Those are multiples better at oxidizing these things. But again, they don't circulate throughout the pool.
No residual. You can't test anything in the water. So that's why you see them as secondary disinfection systems.
They are secondary indeed, but they're awesome. If they're working right and they're plumbed correctly, they are a great supplement to the oxidant demand, but they're not out there in the field. And that's why we make enzymes. We can't do anything about the nitrogen compounds. We can't do anything about the germs or the algae or anything like that, because that's not what Orenda does. Chlorine has to handle what it has to handle, but we can take care of carbon chain, non-living organics. That bather waste, or somebody called it body butter one time, which is gross, but accurate at the same time. Oh, we can get rid of the body butter. And it's exciting to watch. I mean, when I purge a pool with enzymes, I usually tell customers, even if I'm over the phone, just telling them for the first time, give it 20 minutes and pull your phone out and enjoy the show, because you're going to start seeing bubbles like crazy because you're breaking down carbon chain organics into carbon dioxide. And these enzymes, the way I think of it is they're consuming bather waste and converting it. It's a great thing. And so for a high bather load pool, there's nothing like it. And I was a swimmer, and long before I came to Orenda, I experienced it as a swimmer. And I was shocked. I didn't know what it was. Like, wow, the water, oh my God, the water feels different. And it was super clean and super clear. I had never been in water like that. And I found out it was these enzymes years before I worked for Orenda. So I got to experience it in the field myself. And I will tell you, there's nothing quite like it. In fact, I have a screenshot and a video right here that compares the two. So I'm going to keep it muted, but this is the same pool without and then with enzymes. That's the same lane. Now, competitive swimmers, you may look at a pool and see the lines on the bottom. You may think, oh, that's a pretty clean pool, but swimmers look at it through goggles and the light refracts in a very different way. The left side is far more common than the right side in our world. We're used to seeing stuff on the left. Now, part of that could be filtration. I would say a considerable amount of it is filtration, but you got to think, what gums up filtration? Well, typically non-living organics.
Body butter.
Yes, it's body butter. if you have a scum line on your tile, there's a reason for that.
Body butter.
Chlorine wasn't made to get rid of that. So it floats up to the top like oils always do, and it sticks around the perimeter of the pool. So that's the main thing that we do is enzymes. Certainly for commercial pools, we treat water parks with it. We treat the heavier the bather load, the better we shine. And we love swim schools, YMCAs, health clubs, things like that. Basically, the nastier that bather load is, the better the enzymes perform.
Where you see where you see a big difference. So that's show us on the website the enzyme again, so people can see what it's called.
Sure, it's called CV600, and you can also use CV700,
which has it built in with something else.
Correct. CV700 is the same product. It's the same enzyme, but we have a phosphate remover in it. Now, it's not the same phosphate remover as PR10000, which we'll talk about next. It is a weaker phosphate remover, but we're not saying that this product is designed to wipe out huge levels of phosphates. It's designed to help maintain lower levels of phosphates.
So this is something that they should use on a regular basis to keep
Depends on the bather load.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on the bather load. So on most residential pools, the truth is, no, you don't really need a lot of enzymes. We recommend a purge, which is 1 quart per 10,000 gallons to open up your season, just because get off to a right start, build that residual up front, and then you maintain based on your bather load. So most residential pools probably only need about 2 ounces per 10,000 gallons a week at the most. Some maybe they may need 5. Maybe they have dogs. Maybe they have a birthday party coming up. But in general, you could get away with even less than that. And that's where we came up with the Clarifier. So the Clarifier is also containing the same exact enzyme, but it's a chitosan clarifier to get particles coagulated together, attract them into larger particles, and help them get filtered out faster. So what we typically recommend on a pool that doesn't get used very much, purge at the beginning with CV600 or 700. Either one is fine. And then you would switch to the Clarifier on those pools. But again, if you have a bather load and people use that pool every week, you probably don't really want to use the Clarifier as much. You'd rather stick with a stronger enzyme.
Gotcha. Very cool.
Well, I think so. I agree with you.
Wow. I'm learning some new stuff I didn't realize you guys had some products where there was like 2 things together. I thought they were all separate products. So I'm learning something new today too.
Only the enzymes. Yeah, we can't blend the other ones. Like 1 drop of PR10000 would pretty much conflict with anything. So it's a very, very concentrated product. But the whole idea is it's based on your bather load. The busier your bather load, I mean, if it's an outdoor community center pool that's going to have hundreds of people a day, you want CV600 or 700. You're not going to use a Clarifier in that situation. It's not going to have enough. Your issue is not so much particulates, it's organics. That is the 800-pound gorilla. That's what you need to address so that chlorine is not bogged down on all of that consumes it. It's going to be able to have more in residual for longer so that it can kill germs. And that's the ultimate thing. Germs and algae, I should say. That's chlorine's primary job in an outdoor pool.
And what we're doing is we're trying to help it be able to do the main job that it should be doing. Mm-hmm. It's like taking somebody who has too many, like they have a job and they're given too many tasks to do. And It's impossible for them to really do a good job. Chlorine can't do a good job if it's given too many tasks. So
you're taking one of those tasks. You're bogging it down with paperwork, basically.
Yeah. You're giving a helper to help it so it can do its main job. And this little helper is doing one of the jobs partially for it, which is going to even up the chlorine to be able to do more of that sanitation over here for all of our recreational water illnesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next product is PR10000, and this is our primary phosphate remover in the trade. This is what most people know us as, phosphate removal company. Now, that the exception to that is a lot of people are starting to realize that we have more to offer than just a phosphate remover, which is good. But for the most part, this is the most widely adopted product in the service trade. Homeowners are starting to figure it out that basically you don't have to remove phosphates very frequently, but it makes your life a lot easier if you do. Just keep your levels below 500 parts per billion. That's what the research shows. And it simplifies the entire ecosystem of your water, so to speak. I can't go into too much specifics on it right now. We would be talking for too long, Lauren, but take Orenda Academy, check out our third pillar of proactive pool care. You can read that all here. So I have a link right there for our third pillar. Read this. This will explain it. There's a video in there. It's actually several videos in there. It explains where phosphates come from, the whole kill rate versus growth rate thing. All of this is there, and we cite our sources. So if you're looking for why phosphate removal is important, that's a pretty good place to start. And yeah, you could just rely on chlorine and have whatever phosphates you want. I know there's some forums online that say, oh, you don't need a phosphate remover. Okay, that's fair, but you better have a lot of chlorine to back that statement up, because if you don't, you have to have 7.5% of your cyanuric acid in free chlorine. That's the ratio, because the free chlorine to cyanuric acid ratio is what controls the strength and speed of your chlorine. Well, if you have 100 CYA, because you use trichlor, you need at least 7.5 parts per million free chlorine every day. That's your new baseline.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. Can you maintain that? Probably not.
Probably not on a residential pool when they're only there once a week and the chlorine goes up and down and up and down, especially if they're hand feeding or using a floater or anything like that.
Right. So
you're basically helping your chlorine again by keeping phosphate levels down. And we know algae like to feed on phosphates as well. It's like a biological buffet. So
well, it is a buffet. I want to be very clear. This is not an algicide. That's not what we do. We're not killing anything. It's only taking this one element out. It's taking nutrients out. And the thing is,
it's taking one of the things that algae like to feed on. It doesn't mean that you're still not going to have algae problems due to other things, but it's removing that one element that they really do like. But then you don't need as much chlorine either, because now you're not having to keep that chlorine as high, like you were saying, in order to do the same thing if you kept the phosphate levels down.
Right. Because algae, given everything that it needs, can reproduce in a matter of hours if it has everything it needs. And typically, that's what? Warm water, ample sunlight, low chlorine, plenty of nutrients. I'm not a botanist. I'm not an algae expert, but anybody in the pool trade knows it becomes more of a problem in the summer, and then especially in the late summer, because it's had more time. Well, if you take the nutrients out of the equation, or at least one key nutrient out of the equation, you can at least slow that reproduction rate down. But that doesn't mean you're going to kill any algae. We're not an algicide. That's not what we do. We don't make any claims to be. All we're trying to do is take this one thing out to simplify chlorine's job. And it's not just with things like algae, although that's what everybody wants to talk about. It's with a lot of different things. You take out a responsibility of chlorine. I'm sorry, I phrased that wrong. If you simplify chlorine's responsibility, you actually increase its efficiency because it can do more things. Just like the same logic applies to the enzyme. If you're taking the non-living organic load and reducing that, well, chlorine was going to have to address that itself. So it helps in a different way. But if you test for phosphates, depending on the kit, you could be measuring just one type of phosphate and not realize there's other types in your pool.
Yep. Which that's all covered in your if you guys take the 4 pillars training through Orenda, which is free training, which is really good. And you get a certificate completion at the end with your name on it.
It wasn't free to make, but it's free to take.
Right.
Yeah.
And they talk about all the different phosphates in there.
Yeah. Well, not all, but
there's the majority of the major ones.
Right. The major ones, condensed phosphate, inorganic, organic, all sorts of different types. But here's the thing. PR, when you put it in, it'll react with any of them. So even if your test kit didn't pick up on them, if this stuff clouds in your pool, it found something. So it's a good thing to just keep the levels down, but you don't need to go crazy on it. This is an expensive product to make. It's an expensive product to buy. You do not need a lot. Most pools, a typical backyard pool, say 20,000 gallons, they might use 12 to 16 ounces a year. Some can get away with just 8 ounces a year. So you don't need to buy a lot is what I'm saying. All right. If you keep your levels low and maintained, and if you're using CV700, you could get away with a lot less. But the idea is just keep the levels low, ideally under 500 parts per billion. That's pretty much it.
What is the shelf life for the Orenda chemicals?
Any of the chemicals, we have 100+ year shelf life. In other words, indefinite, but they cannot freeze. So do not let the products freeze. That's a great question.
I was thinking based on how much they're using, if they're a homeowner and just have one pool, they probably buy the small bottle instead of the big bottle if it broke down over time. Like chlorine, we know
Right.
the strength doesn't stay the same as it sits. So if they had a big bottle and they're only using like 12 or 16 ounces a year.
Yeah, you could use it
And
50 years from now and it's going to be just as good as it is today.
so they could
So-
buy the bigger bottle and still use it. The bigger bottle would be more economically better for pool companies. They're going to go through it a lot faster.
Yeah, it can be. If you buy a quart and you're a homeowner and you buy a quart, you're going to get at least 2 years of use out of that, maybe 3, depending on
Yep.
your needs.
That's what I was thinking. The bigger bottle they could still use though if they wanted to, because
Right.
the shelf life is a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no reason for a homeowner to buy a gallon. Now, service techs, yeah, they'll use gallons because they have so many more pools, and a lot of people will buy in volume and then they'll refill things. Some people put it in spray bottles so that they just kind of spritz it and broadcast it out across the surface, just like the Clarifier. That seems to be very effective as well. So, if you have any of these specific questions, just contact us. You can contact us through the app, through our Facebook. We're very responsive on Facebook. So if you have specific questions on how to use any of these products, feel free to. And again, this is unique for me because normally I don't really talk about our products unless someone has a specific question privately. I don't really broadcast it, but this is your time, Lauren. So if you want to know about it, I'm happy to answer anything.
Oh, it's very interesting.
Now to the final product, SC1000. I would say this is our most misunderstood and most dynamic chemical that we have. When I first came to Orenda, I asked a lot of questions about SC1000, and honestly, not much about it was known except it was good for startups and it helped prevent stains and scale. How it did that was sort of a mystery to me and to the people I was asking, because it is a chemical that is used in industrial water treatment, just like the phosphate remover, just like the enzymes. They weren't made for pools. We brought them to swimming pools and did the dosing appropriately. The only way you can hit an NSF certification is if you have a certain purity standard. Well, you have to have that purity standard in other industries usually. These do. So SC1000 was originally made for cooling towers. And what it does, especially at hotter temperatures, is it inhibits scale formation and stains because it's a chelating agent. It binds to metals and minerals. And as far as we know, it doesn't really let go. So it'll bind to a calcium ion or a iron or copper or whatever else. And when it binds to it, chlorine cannot oxidize that metal. And in the case of calcium, carbonate ions cannot carbonate with that calcium because there's nothing to bind to. The protons on calcium are already spoken for, and the electrons on iron, they're already spoken for. What this translates to, now that I got all the science out of the way, is this stabilizes your pool from from any heavy metal and mineral precipitation or oxidation. So you can prevent stains very easily. You can prevent scale pretty well, although scale still is an LSI function. So if you're way out of whack on your LSI, you could still get some, especially if you don't have enough of this in your pool, because, well, if you don't have enough, whatever is left over could still precipitate scale. We are not very good at removing metals. That's not what this is made for. So unlike a sequestering agent, by the way, sequestering agents are great for a couple reasons, but they also have their downsides. So does ours. A sequestering agent is kind of like a metal magnet. It's going to pull a whole bunch of metals to it, or minerals, and it's going to become a bigger molecule. And that's easier to filter out. And that's a good thing if you're trying to remove metals, if you're trying to gain control of a pool that has a lot of metals in the tap. A sequestering agent is a good solution for that, combined with a metal filter of some kind. Ours individually goes ion by ion and keeps them separate. So it passes through most filters, unlike clustering together into a bigger particle. These metals are not going to get filtered out as easily. Now, they still can if you have an appropriate metal filter. It's just not really made for that. Conversely, if you already have a stain on the surface, this is not designed to undo a stain. That's not what it is. It's not an acid product. So it's not going to...
It's a prevention to get that stain before you get it. But if you've already got a pool with the stain, it's not going to be a stain remover or anything.
Absolutely. So there are other companies that are far more specialized in stain removal than this. This is not made for stain removal. Stain prevention it's really good for that, as Lauren just said. Same with scale prevention. Now, this can dissolve scale. So if you're trying to remove a scale line, raise your water level up, use SC1000 as directed, give it some time, and it will, dissolve away and soften that scale line. Pretty soon you could just brush it right off with your fingertip. We actually have a video that does that. So removing scale, it's an LSI function, but using the LSI to balance your water appropriately for that task and SC1000 together, it's pretty easy to remove scale and to prevent it on things like salt cells, heat exchangers, etc.
And if listeners are listening, they have on their free app. Do you want to show it really quick, since it kind of goes with all this, and you kind of mentioned the LSI already? They have a free app, and on the app you can do the Orenda training we were talking about, but you can also access their LSI calculator. And Eric's going to share his screen from his cell phone. And he's going to show you the app really quick. And what's on there. So it opens up. Here's where you can register for your academy. You should do the academy first, and then the 4 pillars, I think, because the academy is kind of the basics, and then the 4 pillars is a lot more detailed. Yes. And just to let everybody know that if you do the Orenda Academy and the 4 pillars, you can get $50 off my CPO class too, correct?
Yep. I think that's
on
right
the webpage right there. So we have a coordination of $50 discount. You might wonder, well, what do we gain out of that? We are trying to promote more education to the student, give them a discount if they're willing to do that extra education before they even get to the CPO class. And it's all going to be that encouragement of extra education on water chemistry, water balance, and some of these extra things. Like I think you talk about algae, calcite crystals in the 4 pillars, all kinds of interesting little caveats that some parts of the country deal with a lot more than others. Right. But this is the crust of the app right here.
This is the vast majority of what people spend their time on, is the dosing calculator, the LSI. And if you have an Android phone, this is coming soon, but it's not out there yet. But this little question mark down here is the color code that tells us what the LSI actually means and what the colors represent. And what it tells us in this column is the aggregate of this column for the LSI in terms of the holistic balance of your water, rather than focusing on, I need my pH to be such and such, and I need my alkalinity to be between 80 and 120, and I need my calcium to be, well, I'm going to show you, at 80 degrees, you can be perfect according to the textbook, 200 to 400 calcium, 80 to 120 alkalinity. And that's pretty close to balance. In fact, at 90, it's perfectly balanced. That's great. But let's make it a salt pool.
I was going to ask about that, because we have a lot more salt chlorine generators.
Right. So if we're going to make it a salt pool, let's be real.
And I hear a lot of pool companies are told to maintain their cyanuric acid level for salt chlorine generators on average around 70.
Yeah, 50 to 80, depends on the manufacturer. I think they're changing that now, largely because of the free chlorine to cyanuric acid ratio. The more we learn as an industry, the more we can adapt. But even if you had more than that, if you had 70, still the number goes down. And you thought you had perfect chemistry, right? So even if you went up, let's go right in the middle, 200 to 400 calcium, 80 to 120 alkalinity. If we go right in the middle, we're still etching. So the ranges don't always apply. And then I can undo this too. Like if I make this, let's say, a responsible amount of CYA, and we have a salt pool, and we're going to have, say, 3,500, I can actually make this at 80 degrees work. I would have to raise my calcium up a little bit. And on a salt pool, I don't actually want that much alkalinity. But for right now, let's just balance it just to demonstrate. 0.0. Now, that's at 80 degrees. But I just spoke to a customer in New York right now. His pool is still 58.
Wow.
Now, that being said, minus 20 is still balanced. That's still acceptable. But do you think it was 58 degrees in February? No.
No, it's colder than that.
Yeah.
So temperature has a big factor. And I know we talked about this on our podcast episode back. It was posted last month. Anybody wants to listen to it, there's a whole podcast episode with Eric Knight, and it's on winterization of pools. So it's up north, all you guys that get cold. Those of us in Florida, we don't deal with it really.
No, you don't. But in this case, I'll do an example of how to actually figure out the calculation. On a salt pool, right now, your pH is going to get over 8. It's going to get up based on your carbonate alkalinity. You're going to get up to the pH ceiling, basically as high as your pH can go when CO2 in the water equalizes with the air above it. Read our articles. I don't want to get into it right now, but it's physics. There's nothing you can do about it. So we have to prepare for that because you're going to start getting scale, and it's going to start in your salt cell, and it may manifest itself as flakes that blow into your pool, or it may just cake onto the salt cell, or it may stay in your heat exchanger, but you're going to start seeing scale. Then on your tile line, in your spa, on your spillway, things like that. How do we account for that so that when we get to this worst case scenario, that number is green? Well, number one, we have too much alkalinity at 80 degrees. See, because if we were at 50 something degrees, this one wouldn't be as big of a problem. See, now we're in 0.3. We're still pretty close. I mean, if you look at the LSI, that's over 0.30. Well, we're barely scale forming at this point. If I just had a little bit less alkalinity, I'm safe. So this calculator shows us how we can actually account for different things like a salt pool or a liquid chlorine pool or a trichlor pool, although good luck doing that this year. But you can account for these various factors if you know what your water is going to be. And one of those key things is knowing where the temperature is going, not where it is just now, but where's it going to be next week? Are you talking in September where it's going to be getting colder every week? Or are you talking right now in May where it's getting warmer every week? This helps you predict. So by knowing your temperature, let's say we're at 80 right now in Florida, maybe 81. We know we're going to be
scaling. It was 80 yesterday when we went swimming in our nice pool, family's pool. So
okay, perfect. Okay, so I would say I actually don't want quite as much alkalinity, and if I do my job right, the pH is not quite going to get up to 8.2 because I've lowered my pH ceiling, so it may only get up to 8.0. Now look at that. At 80 degrees, I'm still green. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to correct down as low as I can in the yellow without going red, which is 7.5 here. I don't want to go too far because then it'll etch. But just to be safe, I'll go to 7.6. 22,000 gallon pool. I get two numbers. This is only going from left to right. And this is what I wanted to illustrate.
This is the dosage, guys. So if you hit that get dosage button on the bottom from the calculator, it will actually do dosage on the top for you.
Based on this number. And, I don't know how many pools are exactly 22,000 gallons, but a good way to know this is get a water meter when you fill the pool and find out exactly what your water contains, including the piping. The more accurate this number, the better you can be. So let's say you did that and you knew it was exactly 22,650. Okay. That number is going to be exact to fractions of an ounce. But notice there's two numbers to give you muriatic acid. Well, the reason why is this calculator doesn't know you're trying to do both. It only knows left to right. So if I'm trying to go from 8.2 down to 7.6, based on this alkalinity, your current alkalinity, it doesn't realize that you're also trying to reduce alkalinity. So in this case, we're only going to reduce alkalinity because the pH will get corrected during this correction. So I'm going to ignore this top number, and I'm only going to do 116 ounces of muriatic acid, heavily diluted, poured around the perimeter. The more dilution, the better. You still get the same amount of acid in there, but then you don't actually let it run to the bottom of the pool, etch, pull out hydroxides, and everything from there on out is a problem. If you are dosing our chemicals, this is the basic guidelines of how much you would need. And then you tap that envelope at the top right, and you can send this to yourself or to your customer, however you want to do it. And you can just go here and you can change the name, and you can say the name of the customer, whatever else works for you. And now you have a record. So it's not the best logging system. I know that. We have been looking into ways to save data long-term, but we're a chemical company. We're not an app company. So we appreciate your patience on that. But that's basically it. So all this information is available to you. It's totally free. We want you to be able to calculate these things on your own and be very precise in your measurements.
Can we show briefly, not get into all the exact details, but show briefly your startup barrel and all that?
Sure.
For those that are going to do startups, they do offer a startup method for new plaster, new surfaces.
So I'm going to go to procedures, and that's the post-fill startup. So in case you show up to the pool nobody told you it was being plastered, and now you have a full pool and you have to act. That's how you do it. But we're going to come down here to, there's how to use the barrel, but I actually want to do the full startup procedure. This is a step-by-step walkthrough of the Orenda startup. And we are coming out with a card and some other resources, but all of this information is here to you.
And are you guys going to have
videos.
a train, like a kind of like your Orenda Academy training for the startup procedure?
We
sometime?
sure are. We are working on it right now as we speak. So hopefully we will have that available. But if you want to see specifics on the product, you can go back to products. There it is. That's what it looks like.
You have the startup barrel, and then you're using the SC1000?
SC1000, yes, to chelate the calcium, pre-dissolve it, get a little bit of that SC1000 in the barrel. The rest goes in the pool. That's what helps to keep your startup running smooth, bind to the calcium to make sure it doesn't precipitate. And it helps kind of, I say coat the walls, but basically it helps provide an environment to introduce calcium rapidly without a scale forming condition. So it's all part of the process. And yes, we will have a startup academy, hopefully soon. And that will answer most of those questions. But we take a lot of calls about startups.
I'll be taking that one. That's
right
exciting.
Well,
I can't wait. I've been waiting. I keep asking.
Well, hey,
can't wait to see that one. I think a lot of people enjoy watching that one as well. Is it going to be like a similarly set up like the Orenda Academy and the 4 pillars, where we can do it through the app or whatever? Like
it
register?
Will be set up. It'll be the exact same sort of format. The videos will look a little bit different as we've evolved. We get sort of better at that. So the videos are going to be, hopefully, we believe, a higher quality, but it's still the same process. You take the quizzes along the way and you'll get a certificate at the end of it.
Nice. So is there any other products you want to highlight or anything else you want to mention today? Or
no, not really. I appreciate you listening to all of my ramblings, but yeah, I mean, we aren't really a product driven company. And I know that sounds absurd to say that, but what we really want to do is help homeowners get their pools fixed the right way or set up on minimal pool chemistry, and then service techs to be profitable. So they're not chasing things like pH, chasing alkalinity, struggling with the same problems, not realizing that, hey, you know, that textbook you were following, that's great at 80 degrees. But if you're trying to do that at 50 degrees, you're fighting against physics. You're going to lose. So most of what we invest in is education, hence the academy programs and all of the blogs and all of the trainings that we do virtually.
Hence why we've kind of partnered together with trying to increase education, which is awesome. I love having that partnership with you guys. Well, tell us, the listeners, how they can find Orenda in case they're brand new. Can they find you on the web?
Well, it's just Orenda Tech, as in short for Orenda Technologies, ORENDATECH.com. Everything is in there. The app is just called Orenda. You'll find our leaf on it. It's pretty easy to find. And I guess go from there. But there's no shortage of ways to find us and contact us. You can contact us through Facebook, info@orendatech.com. You can do the contact form in the Orenda app. There's so many ways you can get a hold of us. We want to be accessible to you. And then if you are a service professional or a builder and you want to be on our dealer locator, there's a button for that right on the homepage. You can't miss it. Sign up for that. And you will be ranked higher if you've passed our Orenda Academy courses, because homeowners that look for our products or look for our program to be implemented, they want to know who's actually trained in how to do that program. And you'll learn that sort of thing in Orenda Academy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on today, Eric. It's been a pleasure, and just fun to hear about what you guys do, what you had to offer. So it's been a pleasure having you.
Well, thank you, Lauren. It's always a pleasure to be on with you. And until next time, thank you, everybody, for having me.
Bye, Eric.
Thank you.